All right, ready for another deep dive.
Always. What do we have today?
Today, we're looking at a book that's gotten a lot of buzz, Anxious People.
Oh, yeah, by Fredrik Backman.
Yeah. Have you gotten a chance to read it yet?
Oh, yeah. Loved it. Really great book.
So for our listeners who haven't had the chance to check it out yet, this book is kind of like if you threw a hostage situation, a bunch of really quirky characters, and a whole lot of existential angst into a blender.
It's not your typical crime thriller.
No, it's more about like the anxieties we all deal with, like that feeling of not quite measuring up, wanting to belong, and sometimes just like making choices that seem totally crazy when you look back on them.
Oh, absolutely.
So I thought we could start by talking about the setting.
Yeah, great idea.
Because Backman throws us right into the middle of this chaotic apartment viewing.
On New Year's Eve, no less.
Of course, on New Year's Eve, a day that already comes with so much pressure and expectation.
A lot of anxiety, a lot of reflection.
And then on top of that, a failed bank robbery turns everything upside down.
Yeah, talk about a recipe for disaster, or at least heightened anxiety.
Right. And the characters he introduces are just spot on.
Oh, they're fantastic. So well developed.
Like you've got Roger and Annalena.
That older couple.
Yeah, they seem to live for these apartment viewings, always analyzing the square footage.
The resale value.
Like even with a gun pointed at them, they're more worried about property prices.
It's so funny. But it also makes you think, right, about how we all cope with stress in different ways.
Right.
Some people shut down, some make jokes, and some obsess over real estate.
Then there's Ra and Julia.
The expectant couple.
Constantly bickering.
Oh, always.
They're about to become parents, but they can't even agree on a baby name, let alone whether the apartment has enough storage space.
I think their dynamic is so relatable. It really captures those anxieties about becoming a parent and the pressure to get everything right.
Oh, yeah. And Backman just nails that feeling of being totally overwhelmed by expectations.
Both societal and self-imposed, yeah.
And then we have Leonard.
Oh, poor Leonard.
This poor guy's stuck in a rabbit costume.
He's an actor who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, and his observations throughout the whole hostage situation are just hilarious.
He adds this layer of absurdity to everything.
But he also has these moments of, like, unexpected wisdom.
Like, he sees things from a completely different perspective.
Because he's so out of his element.
Right.
It's like he can cut through all the tension with these really insightful comments.
Exactly. And you find yourself thinking, wait a minute, the rabbit has a point.
Right. So we have all these characters trapped in this apartment, anxiety's running high, and then the bank robber, who we learn is desperate to keep their children after a messy divorce, disappears.
Vanishes.
Like into thin air.
The police are baffled. The apartment is supposedly sealed.
And you're left wondering, how on earth did they pull that off?
That's where Backman's skill as a writer really shines, right? He drops all these little clues throughout the story.
Oh, he does.
A ventilation duct in a closet, a second identical apartment next door.
Yeah.
The real estate agent acting a little suspicious. And you, as the reader, are trying to piece it all together, like, what is going on?
I have to admit, I did not see the ending coming.
It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
So well crafted.
So speaking of those clues, let's go back to, do you remember when the police were searching the apartment?
Uh-huh.
And they almost missed that ventilation duct?
Yeah.
I mean, it seems so obvious in hindsight, but Backman just cleverly distracts you with all the other chaos that's happening.
It's like he's playing with you a little bit.
He is. And then there's the whole thing with the second apartment, the one right next door that's an exact replica of the hostage apartment.
Yeah, it's like he plants that seed early on, but you don't realize its significance until way later.
Right, like he's always one step ahead.
Totally.
And the real estate agent.
Oh, don't even get me started.
She's good. She's really good.
So good.
Like, looking back, all the signs were there, but she just blended in so well with all the other anxious characters.
She was just playing the part.
You never suspect her.
It's a masterclass in misdirection.
It is.
And the beauty of the plan is in its simplicity.
Yeah.
She takes advantage of the police's assumptions, the media frenzy, the general chaos, to stage her own disappearance.
Like she saw an opportunity in all the anxiety and fear and just went for it.
Bold move.
Which makes you wonder, like, how much of our own anxieties are self-created? Are we sometimes our own worst enemy?
That's a big question. And it's something Backman explores throughout the book.
He does. Like, think about the bank robber's motive.
Yeah.
It wasn't greed. It wasn't malice. It was this desperate, almost primal need to keep their children.
Yeah.
They were so terrified of losing custody that they resorted to robbing a bank with a toy gun.
Makes you think about the lengths people will go to for those they love.
Yeah. And how even the most well-intentioned actions can have these unintended consequences.
Oh, yeah.
So while all this is happening outside, with the police frantically searching for this missing bank robber inside the apartment, something totally unexpected starts to happen.
Yeah, what's that?
The hostages start to connect.
Oh, that's right, they do. It's like the whole hostage situation just forces them to let their guard down.
Yeah, to be vulnerable.
And they start opening up in ways they never would have imagined.
Right. It's like this really beautiful example of how vulnerability can create those connections between people. You have all these people from totally different walks of life, each with their own baggage, their own anxieties.
And suddenly they're in this pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And there's no choice but to face those fears head on.
And share those stories.
Right.
And I love how Backman portrays these interactions, too. Like, it's not all, these deep philosophical conversations.
No.
There's humor.
Yeah, there's bickering.
There's even, like, a little bit of romance budding between Zara.
The psychologist.
Yeah. And Leonard, the guy in the rabbit costume.
It's so quirky and charming.
Right. It's like Backman captures the whole spectrum of human emotions.
Yeah. You're laughing one minute, you're on the verge of tears the next.
Okay, but can we talk about Zara for a second?
Sure.
Because she is such a fascinating character.
Very complex.
At first, she comes across as, like, cold and cynical.
Detached, almost.
Like, she doesn't even care about the hostage situation.
Right.
But then as the story unfolds, you start to understand why she built up those walls around herself.
It's a defense mechanism, a way to protect herself from getting hurt.
From disappointment.
Exactly.
And then there's the revelation about the letter she's carrying.
Oh, yeah, from the man who jumped off the bridge.
It just adds this whole other layer to her character.
A lot of depth.
So much depth. For those who haven't read the book, this letter was written by a man who was really struggling.
With his own demons.
With life. He jumped from the bridge, the same bridge that's like this key location in the story.
Right.
And he writes this really heartfelt letter to a woman he barely knows.
Pouring out his regrets, his hopes, everything.
And for reasons that we learn later, Zara ends up with this letter.
She's carrying the weight of this stranger's story. His pain.
It shapes how she sees the world, how he interacts with other people.
And it makes her realize that everyone's carrying something, right?
Yeah.
Some invisible weight that we don't see.
That shapes who they are.
Yeah, absolutely. And Backman is so good at weaving all these individual stories together.
Yes.
Showing how these lives that seem so different can actually, like, intersect and influence each other.
Like, think about Jack.
The young police officer.
Yeah. He's trying to handle this crazy hostage situation.
Right.
But he's also dealing with the loss of his mother. And he's caring for his sister.
Who's struggling with addiction.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that even the people we expect to be strong and in control are often fighting these really tough battles that we don't see.
Absolutely. Everyone's going through something.
And it's not just the characters inside the apartment who are dealing with anxiety.
Right.
The police officers outside are feeling the pressure too.
Especially Jack and his father.
Yeah, Jim. They're trying to negotiate with a supposedly armed bank robber, manage the media, and protect the hostages.
And they have their own baggage they're dealing with, too.
Oh, yeah. Like that scene where Jim mistakes a box of Christmas lights for a bomb.
It's funny, but also, like, heartbreaking.
It is, because it shows how high the stakes are and the constant fear of making a mistake.
The consequences could be huge.
So speaking of mistakes, what did you think of the bank robber's decision to, rob the bank in the first place?
I mean, it was obviously a dead-out act.
Right.
Driven by love for their kids.
Yeah.
But it also put a lot of innocent people at risk.
It is.
You can empathize with their desperation.
Yeah.
But their actions have these ripple effects.
Right.
It causes fear and trauma. For the hostages, for their families.
And it's not just the hostages, it's the police, the media, the whole community. Like, one act can create all this anxiety and uncertainty that extends way beyond the immediate situation.
Which I think is what makes anxious people so relevant.
Yeah.
It speaks to this pervasive anxiety we're all feeling. Like, things are kind of spinning out of control.
Yeah.
And there's this pressure to always be performing, to be successful.
And in the middle of all this chaos and uncertainty, Backman gives us these little glimpses of hope.
Yeah.
These moments of genuine connection and compassion.
That remind us that human kindness can still prevail.
Like, think about that scene where Ro, even though she's all stressed about becoming a parent, reaches out to the bank robber.
Offers support and understanding.
Yeah, it's small, but it's powerful. It shows the power of empathy.
Yeah.
And even Estelle, the older woman who seems really quiet at first, she steps in to help the bank robber.
She has this quiet strength.
This wisdom.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, sometimes the most profound acts of kindness come from the most unexpected places.
Totally. And speaking of unexpected sources of wisdom, let's go back to Leonard.
Our guy in the rabbit suit.
He's like this accidental philosopher, dropping truth bombs left and right.
Yeah, he's like the court jester, but under the guise of humor and absurdity, he's actually revealing these uncomfortable truths.
That other people are too afraid to say out loud.
Exactly. And in a world that's obsessed with conformity and success, Leonard is like a breath of fresh air.
He reminds us that it's okay to be different,
To be quirky.
to find our own path.
I think that's what Anxious People is all about.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's about celebrating our shared humanity,
Our imperfections,
our anxieties,
and our ability to connect with each other.
even in the most ridiculous situations.
It's this reminder that, we're all just trying to figure things out.
Yeah, trying to find our place, make connections. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how Backman uses the bridge as this like recurring symbol.
Oh, yeah, the bridge. Definitely.
It's not just a physical thing, it represents like all these different things.
The ups and downs of life.
Yeah, the choices we make, the consequences of those choices.
The uncertainty.
Right? Like, do you remember how the bridge is introduced at the beginning?
Yeah, who jumps?
Yeah, it casts this shadow over the whole story. It's like this reminder of how fragile life is.
And the desperation some people feel.
And then it's also this symbol of connection, right?
Yeah, like with Zara and Leonard.
Yeah. When they meet on the bridge, that was a powerful scene.
It was. Like they both witnessed this near tragedy,
Uh-huh.
which forces them to think about our own lives, their own mortality.
And it's in that moment of vulnerability that they really start to connect.
Yeah, it's like the bridge becomes this catalyst for them to let their guard down.
To see each other as they really are.
With all their flaws.
And, it's not just Zara and Leonard. There are a lot of characters who are drawn to the bridge.
Right.
They go there to think, to contemplate life, death, everything in between.
It's like a place of reflection.
Yeah, a point of transition where they have to make these big decisions.
That could change everything.
Which makes you think about the bridges we all face in our own lives, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those moments where you're at a crossroads.
You have to make a choice.
And face the unknown.
And those choices, a lot of times, are driven by fear.
By anxiety.
By wanting to protect ourselves. Or the people we love.
Like the bank robber.
Right.
Robbing that bank was a desperate act.
Out of love for their children.
Yeah. But it also led to this whole other set of problems. More risk. More uncertainty.
But Backman shows us that even in those moments when you feel like you're at the edge, there's still hope.
Yeah.
Human connection can pull us back.
Like the way the hostages rally around the bank robber.
After everything they've been through.
They understand why they did it.
It's really powerful.
Shows the power of empathy.
To bridge those divides.
And remind us that there's always room for compassion.
Even when people mess up.
And it's not just the hostages. Even the police, like Jack, they come to understand.
The desperation.
That sometimes people make bad choices, but they're not bad people.
Right. It's about trying to see the bigger picture.
Understand people's motivations.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's one of the things I love about this book. It reminds you that we're all just human.
With our flaws.
Our anxieties.
Our jaggeds.
Our moments of desperation.
But also our capacity for love. For kindness. For connection.
So I think as we wrap up this deep dive, the biggest takeaway for me is the next time you're feeling anxious.
Overwhelmed.
Alone.
Remember, you're not alone.
We're all going through it.
In our own ways.
And sometimes the people who can offer the most comfort, the most connection, are the people you least expect.
And if you're looking for a book that will make you laugh, make you think, remind you of what it means to be human, I highly recommend checking out Anxious People.
By Fredrik Backman. You won't regret it. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive.